Time to get back into another Leica lens video. Since I just purchased a new lens, the Leica 35mm Summilux-M f1.4 FLE version 2 from 2002. And it gives me a chance to talk about the lens that it will be replacing in my collection. This is the 35mm Summicron-M f2 ASPH. I'll be doing an unboxing of the FLE and sample photos of that lens, but first I'll talk about the Summicron-M and go over what I like about that and some sample photos, and finally we'll do a short comparison directly between these two lenses. Keep in mind this is all coming from an amateur perspective. I'm not experienced at all with photography and even less experienced with the rangefinder system. So if you are a professional, you may not want to listen, but if you are a beginner like me, it may be helpful. This 35mm Summicron is the current version, so it's still available at retail for $38.95. What I like about it is that it's a sharp lens and it's also very compact. Build quality is excellent, just as expected. The aperture ring has nice clicks and turns easily, and the focus ring is also very smooth. I have no complaints with the build quality on this lens, and it also comes with a metal lens hood, which is removable. And when you do remove the lens hood, the lens becomes even more compact and low profile on the camera. The lens is missing that extra wide aperture of the Summilux, so the widest aperture on this is f2.0. Going into the sample photos, first I'll post the image straight out of camera, and then right away post the same image with some light editing in Lightroom. What I'll say about the image straight out of the camera is that it seems slightly flat or low contrast to my taste. So with the editing, I usually bring up the contrast and I use the dehazing tool. And then I adjust the exposure accordingly. And it also seems like some colors are more punchy than others. It seems to pick out the reds and blues and make them more vibrant than some other colors. Here on these first photo samples, they're all shot handheld on the M11 using auto shutter speed and auto ISO. So for the outside shots, I made some edits to define the clouds more and bring out the blue sky and bring out the colors in general. For the indoor shots, I didn't do much with the color at all. Here the plant is in focus, and even at f3.4, there's good separation of the background and the foreground with the coffee cup. Here on these outdoor shots again, I think they all look better with adding slightly higher contrast in Lightroom. And here's what I meant by the reds and blues being more vibrant than the yellows or the greens. This might be my favorite photo of the afternoon. Shot wide open at f2, it gives a nice shallow depth of field and a good separation of the statue. And I added a vignette to bring out the subject even more. Let's go into the unboxing of the brand new FLE II. The retail price on this is $53.95, but it's still difficult to find. I couldn't find it on any online retailers in the US. They were out of stock at Leica Store Miami, San Francisco, Adorama, and B&H Photo. but I found this one in stock from Leica Store Montreal. But with the shipping and conversion fees, the total price for me was $5,736. That's still cheaper than the previous version FLE, and this one has a couple improvements, including 11 aperture blades instead of 9 and a closer focus distance. But whether the extra price is worth it compared to a Summicron F2, that's a judgment call. You're paying a lot more for this lens to have that extra wide aperture of 1.4, but you're also paying for it in a larger size of this lens and a heavier weight. The shipping on this was very fast, only about 2 days, but I did have to pick it up at the post office and sign for it. The packaging included the standard gray outer box, the silver inner box, and the documents were down at the bottom of the box. There's the nice leather holder, which is standard on M lenses. And bringing out the lens, it does feel heavier right away. And again, the build quality is excellent. The aperture clicks feel even more crisp than my Summicron, and the focus ring also feels a little bit tighter, but it's still smooth. Maybe this is all because the lens is new and it may loosen up over time. The previous version FLE had a square lens hood and lens cap, but this one has a round collapsible lens hood and a round lens cap. I prefer this over the square lens hood because this one just stays out of the way. It has a lower profile, and I find that I really don't need to use a lens hood in most situations. Taking off the bottom cap, you do notice that the bottom element does stick out noticeably more than the Summicron. And comparing it side by side with the Summicron, with the bottom cap removed and the lens hood removed from the Summicron, I'll post up the dimensions, but what I notice immediately is this larger diameter of the FLE II and the larger weight of the FLE II, and it's slightly longer in length, but that's not that much of a difference. But with the lens hood put back on the Summicron, that makes the Summicron larger in length, and it looks more bulky in general. The lens hood on the FLE II extends by twisting it, and it doesn't close down with pressure. You have to twist it back down to close it. And mounting it on the M11 body, this looks really nice. It matches up perfectly. I do notice right away that the larger diameter kind of fills in the front of the camera more. It does feel more front heavy, but it's still not uncomfortable to handle. And it will still stand up upright on the desk when you're using a case. Actually, I think I did see a silver version of the FLE II lens available on B&H Photo, but I decided not to get that one. I wasn't sure if the silver lens on the black body would work together, but I think black on black is the safer choice. And moving on to the sample photos of the FLE II on the M11 body, I'm starting out with some outdoor shots, stopped down to f8. These are all mildly edited, similar to what I did on my previous sample photos. The contrast and sharpness and vibrance seem very similar to my Summicron-M f2, and I didn't notice that much difference right away. The real difference comes later on with the f1.4 aperture. This example has several compositional elements: the mural in the front, the clock in the center, and the building in the background. And I think this photo came out well. These indoor shots also came out well. I was able to get everything in focus by stopping down to f16. And the M11 body, really handles the light metering well. I didn't really have to change the exposure very much with editing. Another outdoor shot where the building is framed by the cars and the parking lot and the gravel and the trees on the right. And now shooting wide open at f1.4 to show off the bokeh effect. I shot this one by focusing on the eyes, just using the focusing patch on the rangefinder, and that still came out pretty sharp, and there's some mild blurring of the background. And here I came up closer to the subject and focused on the corner of the right armrest, and now there's some even more blurring of the background. This shot came out amazingly well at f1.4, and this is completely unedited and straight out of the camera, and it looks very dramatic with these shadows and with these colors. And here's a little more crazy blurring of the tree branches. This kind of image has some kind of character to it that I wouldn't see on the Summicron-M at f2. And this last image where I focused on the F and the R produced this wild effect in the clouds in the background. And comparing the images side by side from the Summicron-M f2 and the Summilux FLE II, I shot both of these on the SL2S just to get the focus down, and shot it on a tripod with a 2-second delay to minimize any camera shake. The first image stopped down to f8 with auto ISO and auto shutter speed straight out of the camera. The contrast and colors look very similar on both lenses, but the sharpness of the FLE II is much better in the center, on the edges, and throughout the image. But the real difference comes out when both of them are shot wide open, the Summilux at f1.4 and the Summicron at f2.0. The FLE II gives a much more dramatic fall off and bokeh effect, and gives more character to the image. So which is the better lens and which one should you get? The Summilux has the floating lens element, the round lens hood, the 11 aperture blades, but most importantly it has that extra stop of f1.4 to give you that better low light capability and the better bokeh effect. But it's much more expensive, and it comes at a cost of a larger size of the lens and a heavier weight of the lens. But if you don't need the extra low light performance and won't be shooting at f1.4, then I would just go with the Summicron-M. It's much less expensive, and it has a smaller profile on the camera, especially without the lens hood. So it's a great camera for street photography or everyday use. But for me, I just wanted that extra option of the f1.4, and I just wanted one 35mm lens to do it all. So I'll be keeping the FLE II and selling the Summicron-M.